Hi, I'm Louise Biriteri. I'm the CEO and founder of Pikl. We're a new insurance provider that specialises in holiday let insurance. My team come from the insurance market, so most of us have got decades worth of experience of pricing and underwriting policies. But what we realised was that many of the existing insurers in the market were not really amending their policies to bring them up to speed with the kind of modern traveller that we're seeing today. And actually many of these insurance policies haven't changed over the last 20 or 30 years. So what we're trying to do is make sure that our products are fit for what people who are letting out their homes for holiday purposes need today, making sure that they're covered if guests trash the property, for example, or if they steal from you. And we're also trying to make sure we can do that with the best technology possible. So we have a really good website journey. We can provide comparisons from across the marketplace for you. We're able to compare 15 different insurance schemes at the moment and make sure that they all have the right level of cover at the right price for you. We do specialist buildings and contents insurance that also covers guest stays. So public liability insurance is where we provide protection in order to cover an injury that could take place at the property, so if the guest had an accident. But it also covers damage that could be caused to a third-party property, so for example, if the guest caused damage to a neighbouring property. Well, it's really important to make sure that you're protecting your home, your asset, from any damage that could be caused by guests. Also important to make sure that you're protecting from any damage that could occur from things like storms or floods that could naturally occur around your property. But you also want to make sure that you've got the right protection there if a guest has an injury, and that can save you a lot of time and effort that could happen in the courts if they try to sue for compensation for that injury. Well, if somebody has an accident in your property, it really depends on what the nature of the accident is. Obviously, if they have hurt themselves, the most important thing is to make sure that they get the right medical treatment that they need as soon as possible. But if that's already been taken care of, or if the accident relates to something that's damaged your property, then get in touch with your insurance company and they'll be able to talk you through the steps to take. Well, for holiday let owners, it really depends on the type of property that you have and the various hazards that you might have at your property as to what the right level of public liability insurance is. For most average homes, we find that £2 million per claim is adequate enough, but there might be some properties that need more. So it's always best to talk this through with your insurer. Well, depending on your property, make sure that you've got no trip hazards. So take a good look around. Make sure if there are steps, that they're easy to see. If people have got old cottages where heads could be knocked, make sure that they're obvious, that people can see them. Also, just make sure for things like swimming pools or hot tubs or fires or trampolines that you decide whether you want the guests to use them, whether it's right, whether they're safe to be used. And if they're not, then make sure that they're put away or they can't be accessed by the guests so that they can't cause themselves harm. So malicious damage is when somebody intentionally causes damage to your property. And probably the most common thing happening is when people have a party at your property and they can trash it. Yes, we do. So in fact, we're one of the only people in the UK market that provides malicious damage cover for your home. We want to make sure that whatever happens at your property, you've got the right cover there to be able to protect your property. So contents insurance insures the stuff in your home as opposed to the structure of your home. So how I always like to think about it is if you were to turn your house upside down, everything that falls out of it is basically what's covered under your contents insurance. So there's two types of contents insurance. So there's going to be contents for your property, your belongings, if they are damaged by things that are not related to a guest, so a fire or a flood or something like that taking place at your property. Then there's contents insurance that could be damaged by the guest. So that's a separate level of cover. There may also be contents at the property that belongs to the guest, and that again is another level of cover. So if you're looking at contents insurance, you might want to inquire about those three things to make sure they're there. So you have to be very careful about burglary and theft at a holiday property. Now, most insurers in the UK are going to say that they're only going to cover burglary or theft at your property if there has been forced entry into your property. So that means if you've given your keys to your guest, which of course you will have done, then they're not going to cover any theft that takes place. And that could be, during the time that the guest is there or afterwards, if somehow they've managed to take away the keys or get a copy of those keys. What we do at Pikl is we make sure that is covered, so that irrespective of whether you've given the keys to the guest as you would expect, if there is theft at the property, you're going to be covered. So in some cases it really depends on the neighbourhood that your property is in. So if you're in an area that's got a high crime rate, then having a burglar alarm or some security cameras and things like that will often reduce your premiums. But what I would say is it's good practice, to have security, to have good locks fitted on your doors, potentially to have cameras depending on where you are, because that's only going to help if there is an incident that arises, to have relevant evidence that you might need, or to prevent an incident happening in the first place, which obviously can cause time and annoyance in order to fix. So it depends on the insurance company. For most insurers, you're not going to be covered. With Pikl, obviously what we're doing is covering guest incidents. So if you've given the keys to the guest, if they've lost them, or if they've maliciously used those keys later on, we're going to be covering you. So if you suspect there's been a theft at the property, then you'll need to be able to evidence the item that has gone, but it doesn't matter whether that item was taken by a guest or if it was a burglary or something like that. That's going to get covered under a policy with Pikl. If you're not with Pikl, then it's unlikely you're going to be covered. So buildings insurance covers the structure of your property from damage, and that can be damage from weather-related events, floods, storms, or fires, but it could also be from guest damage, so the guest could cause structural damage to your property. So for holiday lets, the difference is that guest element. So as well as covering you for things like weather events, fires and such like, the guest could cause damage to your structure of your building. It's important to remember that things like bathrooms and kitchens and flooring are also considered part of the structure of your buildings. So those are the things that may more commonly be damaged by guests staying at your property. So hopefully you won't need to work this out for you. If you go to most insurance companies and you've got a fairly standard property, this is going to be automatically calculated for you. But in some cases you may need to find this out. Now there's a really good calculator that the RCIS provide. If you search for that online, they can help you to understand what your rebuild cost is. But there are some properties that might have very, very special characteristics, be one-off properties, they might be very old properties, or they might be listed. Now, under those circumstances, the calculator isn't going to work, and what you're going to need is a specialist surveyor to have given you their opinion of what the rebuild cost for the property will be. It's important to note the rebuild cost is how much it costs to rebuild the property if it gets completely destroyed in a fire or something like that. It's not the same as the market value for your property, which could be much higher, or it could indeed be much lower than the cost of actually rebuilding the property. So it is very important to make sure that if you were asked to provide that, that you do have the right figure to make sure that you have enough cover if something terrible were to happen to your property. Yes, so if a guest causes a fire, there's obviously two parts to that. It could be accidentally done, or it could be maliciously done. Now, depending on which insurer you're with, you may not be covered if it's maliciously done. With Pikl, you will be covered irrespective of how that fire is started. Now, of course, depending on the size of the fire, there can be smaller fires that can be dealt with much easily, but if it's a much bigger fire, then you might find that you need to have that property repaired over quite a long period of time. So in which case, if it's your own home, you'll have alternative accommodation provided. If you've got guests staying in the near term, we'll help to relocate those guests, and we'll also have some cover for the loss of rental that you might have. So Pikl covers legal expenses, and what legal expenses is there to do is to basically help you if you have a court case or a legal case that you need to either pursue or defend. So for example, if your guest has had an injury at your property and they decide that they want to sue you for damages, then legal expenses is going to kick in to pay for the cover of the solicitor's costs, whereas your public liability just deals with the amount of compensation that that guest would get. Doesn't cover the legal costs with the solicitors. So that's an example of why you might want legal expense insurance. So legal expenses kicks in when you need to have some sort of legal advice or solicitor's advice. So it might be that you need some help. Perhaps you have a planning issue or something like that has arisen at your property, maybe with regards to your holiday let, and perhaps you need to get some advice from solicitors for that, or it might be that there's a public liability claim that you need to defend, such as a guest having had an injury at your property, and you might need solicitors to help you with that. So that's where legal expenses comes in. We do cover loss of income. It's something that we've actually recently put into our insurance policies because it was something that was requested by customers. Most insurance policies are not going to cover that, but we do provide an allowance for loss of income as a consequence of a claim happening at your property. Well, many insurance providers do have hidden costs in the way of fees. So it's very common, particularly in the holiday let market, for there to be an administration fee. And so you need to consider this as well as the cost of the premium when comparing whether or not you've got the right deal. Now at Pikl, we don't believe in administration fees and we don't charge them. So the price that you get quoted for the premium is the price that you pay. With some insurance companies, the availability for it being listed for holiday lets will affect the premium, and some will be very specific about you notifying them when the property is being listed. At Pikl, that doesn't matter to us. So we will often provide annual cover so that your property can be listed all year round. We do have options as well for 90 days and 30 days, and also just a single day if you want more flexible cover. So it really is down to what you're doing at your property. So for most people, the number of guests isn't going to have an impact. It's really if you are having very, very large parties. So at Pikl, we will not insure more than 20 guests at a single property. So, you're going to have quite a large property to fall outside of that. If you've got more than 20 guests, you're going to need something quite specialist. We can certainly provide recommendations, but we won't cover that as standard. So when you need to make a claim, you'll have a phone number in your policy documents that you can call. Now, we don't list the numbers on our website because actually what we're doing is we're shopping with lots of different insurance companies for you to find the right deal. So depending on the insurer that your policy is with, you're going to have a very specific phone number for you that's on your policy documents. So make sure that you have those to hand when you've got a claim in order to retrieve those numbers. Those claims lines are open 24/7, so you will be able to get hold of someone when you need them. Now, depending on the nature of the claim, there'll be a different approach that will be taken in order to help you. So obviously it's going to be quite different if you're in an emergency situation compared to if there's a very small level of damage that's occurred at your property. So it depends on the nature of the claim as to how long the process is going to take. If you've had a very big incident, like a fire that has burnt your property down, now that could even fall into years in terms of how long that could take to fix, depending on the complexity of what needs to be done to rebuild your property. Again, if it's an injury, that again can take years to get through the courts. Most people are going to have smaller claims where they may have had some property damage at the property, and those typically can be dealt with in a matter of weeks. It really does depend on what has happened, but usually it's going to take a reasonably quick amount of time for us to be able to help you with that. So the best thing you can do when you've got a claim is make sure that you've got some evidence of your property. So assuming that it is property damage that has happened, it's always good to have some recent photos of your property, particularly if say contents has been damaged, then you'll be able to show that those items were in the home. You may also be asked for proof of purchase. So proof of purchase could be receipts for the items that you've bought, or it could be a bank statement or something similar like that. That you may be asked for. So anything that you can do to basically evidence that those belongings belong to you and were in the property is going to be very helpful in making that claim as fast as possible. So the cost of holiday let insurance varies. It really does depend on the type of property that you've got and where it's located, whether it's got any special features to it. Most people are going to pay between £200 and £300 for their insurance, but there will of course be people that have to pay a lot more, particularly if they've got a very specific building type, or they're in a location that could be at higher risk for things like flooding. So insurance premiums actually use some really complicated calculations in order to calculate the price, and that's why when you do a quotation, there are often between 40 and 60 questions that you get asked, and those questions help to determine what the price is going to be in the background using that calculator. And so that's why it will vary for every customer depending on their own personal circumstances and the circumstances of their property. So the best deal will be sought by shopping around. So at Pikl we do that for you. We have 15 different insurance products that we compare, and so we can take the hassle out of shopping around for you. It's always worth double checking if you are shopping around whether or not there are fees as well as the cost of the premium. Many providers will have hidden administration fees, so you need to be able to add that on top to properly compare products, but also check key cover features as well. Many policies will not provide full cover for the guest. They may only provide cover if there is a fire or there is something called an escape of water at the property, which is where, maybe there is water damage that happens from, say, a burst pipe for a tap being left on. For the most part, you're not going to be covered if there are parties at the property, if they trash it, if there's theft at the property, or if there's some sort of accidental damage that the guest causes. So it's very important to check those details. If you're looking for your holiday let insurance, we'd love to be able to help you. Contact us at Pikl, which is www.pikl.com, or give us a call, and we'd love to be able to help you.